Yeah, this presentation, we're just going to talk about a few new ideas. They're new to some people. Some people will be real familiar with this stuff already. We're going to be covering things just child theme creation, stuff like that, but also using source control and some IDEs with WordPress development. And the reason I think it may be new to some people is because I've worked with a few developers now that seems when it comes to creating child themes and editing CSS, I noticed that they're using a lot of built-in plugins within the WordPress system itself. I know one plugin that will automatically create a child theme for you is called Orbezius Child Theme Creator. And but really a child theme is just, it's a couple of files, it's 2 files. Yes?
Sorry, what was that plugin called?
Orbezius.
Orbezius, okay.
I believe it's Orbezius.
Orbezius?
Yeah, Orbezius, like orb, Orbezius.
Okay, Orbezius.
That's an orb that eats other orbs.
Yep, child theme created by Orbezius. Interesting.
So we might go off on a few tangents here, but again, it's just ideas to introduce a few new ideas, and hopefully everyone will see something new here. So when you say tools for child theme development, sure, there's themes and plugins, and yeah, themes and plugins are great. We all use them. A theme is really the best way to start your website and get it 90% of the way there for the client. And plugins and stuff, they're great too, but oftentimes, we do everything we can with plugins and themes, and the client wants further customizations, and we find ourselves just spending too much time looking for a plugin that works. Too much time I consider to be 15 minutes. You should be able to find a plugin to meet the need at that point in time. Themes are a little bit more difficult. Over time you kind of find your favorite theme providers and stuff. Asking people around, finding a website you like, and then discovering what theme they're using is a good way to find a theme. But in the end, you still end up with little things at the bottom that say proudly created with WordPress, or maybe the bottom footer is just huge, or the header is huge and you want to shrink it, or you want to change some colors, and you don't see an option in the theme options to change that. That's when, instead of editing the theme's files itself, which can be overwritten when you get a theme update, you want to create a child theme that basically will keep your files separate, and those settings will override your existing theme settings. So if you run into that situation, it's important to stay calm, right? Don't freak out. I do that sometimes, and just got to calm back down. And remember that it's just software. Anything's possible. You can code around it, or get some help for that. And discuss the options with your client, or yourself if you're your client. And maybe the requirements are flexible. Maybe what you have meets the requirements and meets their needs. There's no need to spend any more time on it. That's a possibility. Otherwise, a theme or plugin customization is definitely an option too. And that's something you need to talk to your client about. Take some time. Or let's say your client gives you the thumbs up, and it's time to do it. So, plugin customization and development, that's definitely doable, and we're going to follow a lot of the same workflow that we'll see here for that. But I think that's a whole other topic in itself, so we'll save that for another time. I think this is going to be kind of a short little presentation tonight that we can expand upon. But theme customization, if you want to start doing customizations within WordPress outside of what the theme offers or what plugins offer, starting with creating a child theme and doing some small customizations there, it's a really good way to kind of get your feet wet and start learning how to do this kind of thing. So let's go ahead and try that out. First of all, let's just talk about what a theme is. A theme we know kind of provides you the overall look and feel for your WordPress site. is just a collection of CSS and PHP and assets like images and fonts. And like I said, it can get your site 90% of the way there. But if you want to take it further, you do need to create a child theme. You don't have to. You can edit your actual theme's settings, but the next time an update comes along, you're going to have a bad day. So
A real bad day.
yeah, everything will be overwritten. So if you don't have a backup, it'll be tough. Also, because those files are changing, and you've updated your theme to the new version, your backed up version of those files may no longer be compatible. So that's another problem. So your child theme, just to be clear, it actually depends upon that parent theme. You still need to leave that parent theme on your site because your child theme will be making use of those files. In the case of the CSS, the child theme CSS can override the parent theme CSS. In the case of the PHP, I believe the child theme's PHP runs before the parent's theme's PHP. Might have to check on that.
It's the active theme, so yeah, I bet it would.
Of the active theme.
Yeah.
So, there's a plugin for creating a child theme. And like I mentioned, there's the Orbisius Child Theme Creator. If you just want to try it out and get started quickly, you can certainly use that. But it's actually pretty easy to do by hand because a child theme, it's like 2 files that you have to create. But you do need SSH access, or you need to have file access to your server. So if you're not comfortable with using Linux or connecting over SFTP, using a plugin might still be a good way to do that for you. The other downside to using the plugin, though, is you may be constrained to using editors for those files within the WordPress site itself. And those editors don't necessarily give you benefits like syntax highlighting or code formatting or refactoring functions that will help make it easier to write your code and read your code too. So what I'm going to show you kind of helps get around those issues and brings your custom code into an integrated development environment, which will give you all those benefits. And so like I said, you'll need an SFTP client and a text editor. Text editors have come a long ways nowadays. Some of them are basically integrated development environments themselves. They'll give you really nice syntax highlighting. I was thinking poorly of this Linux editor called VI earlier this week. And I was in it earlier today working on some PHP code, and I noticed as I was typing, I had just totally glossed over it, but there is syntax highlighting. It detects your language and gives you syntax highlighting. I just noticed that. I had to apologize to VI. No, so text editors have come a long ways. There's Notepad++, it's free. I know a lot of people like Sublime. Some people use Atom. But there's also more robust text editors called integrated development environments. One I really like to use for stuff like this is called PHP Storm. Despite the name, PHP Storm, it actually handles HTML, CSS, JavaScript all really well. And it also has an SFTP client built in. And if you want, it'll connect to your source control repository. So, I don't know why I put a squirrel here. In my mind, I was thinking that, with the developers I've been working with this past year, all very capable and productive people, it's starting to seem to me like people just don't realize that you can use an IDE for WordPress child theme development, which really makes your life easier. So it seemed kind of like a little bit of a one-off, kind of like I'm introducing a new idea, though I know I'm not from talking with people last week. I know I'm not the only people who use IDEs for this. But when using an IDE, you do bring consistency to your development workflow. what I mean by that is, if you have 100 different sites under management, and some of your customers may have other developers that work on the site, and these different developers have different preferences for which development plugins they use. As you switch from one site to the other, you'll find different plugins, and you kind of have to reorient yourself as to how this site is set up so that you can start working on it. If you just know that, okay, you just connect your IDE over SSH or SFTP to the site, access the files, check them into source control, then update your files. It's the same process from one site to another. So you never have to kind of reorient yourself when you switch projects. The workflow is the same. It reduces the number of development tools that you use. So by development tools, I'm talking about the IDE, but I'm also talking about those development plugins. And that's a good thing. It's a lot easier to update your IDE on your local machine than it is to go out to your 100 sites under management and update all those plugins that support your development that may have a new security risk. If it just opened up and maybe they have updates. Maybe one doesn't have an update, but it needs to have an update, And so you can keep your production environment more secure by reducing the number of these plugins. Also keeps your production environment simpler. And, I listened to a podcast by Steve Gibson. He's a security expert. And he said something, I heard him say something last week, that complexity is the enemy of security for your system, or something to that effect. It's harder to keep a system secure when it grows more complex. And you can take advantage of source control integration for PHP and CSS changes, of course. Now, I know that when it comes to changing a procedure, there's plugins that will do a lot of the stuff for us. So I can understand the argument that, not using those plugins is not making things simpler. But I have to point out that it's not just about how simple it makes things for us. By leveraging our knowledge a little bit more, we can make our production environment simpler. And that's really important, because that does keep it clean, keeps things running fast. There's less stuff to update. And it's just, it's a lot less to worry about. A simple production environment is nice, You don't necessarily need to have your development environment running on top of it. And I think nice integrated development environments help you enjoy your work more. Just giving you a nice place to work on your computer, nice place to type, something to help you out when you make a mistake or a typo. IDEs can help you with all of this stuff. You don't have to switch screens, and now you're in FileZilla. You have to upload your file. The IDE can check your file into source control and deploy it to test for you all at once. So that's some nice features there. And just to talk about source control a little bit, I'm really going to gloss over this today. But I found this image here that I thought kind of gives a nice introduction to just kind of explain why you use source control. The idea with source control is you kind of have a continuum of versions of your code that's ready for deployment, ideally ready for deployment at any time. And you can think of that as the middle line, the middle column there. And at any point in time, the developer can create a branch from that, from any particular version, and they can start working on that branch, working on a new idea or a feature, or a bug fix. Sometimes when we start coding and trying out ideas, things just, don't quite work out. And we're like, okay, well, if that idea isn't going to work, we need to try something else. At that point in time, you could just kill it. You don't have to bring it into the main trunk and worry about your main source code trunk or head or head of the repository not being ready for production deployment. And that's really nice when you're working with other people. No one wants to shout out over the cubicle wall, hey John, don't deploy anything right now. I just checked in a bad change to source control. It'll break the system. So that's why it's nice to be able to create branches, and only after you do your testing and you know that everything's good, the feature is sound, you can merge it back into the main trunk. And there's a few more steps to that. I guess when I'm doing this in Teams, I typically merge from the trunk back to my branch just to get a complete updated version. Then I test everything out. And then at that point, if no one else had checked anything into the trunk, then I merge the branch back. But there's a lot more features with source control that you can do. You can create shelves. You can shelve your code, bring it back later. You can, when you want to merge your code back, you can create gates so that people have to review your code before you merge it back in. But that all kind of fits into team environments. But whether you're in a team or you're working by yourself on a project, source control also gives you an additional backup of your custom code. And that's nice because though it will hurt to lose your website if it gets wiped out, a disk fails or something, and your hosting provider doesn't keep backups for you. Maybe you do have a backup of the database, but you have to reinstall all the plugins. You still have your custom code to worry about. You can reinstall a theme, reconfigure it, install the plugins in an afternoon with no problem. But the custom code and remembering what you did is going to be more difficult. So having that somewhere else, like in a source control repository, is nice. And if you need to look back and see when you made a change, you can do that because you can see the history of every check-in. You can also compare differences between files, between different check-ins. You can find out when bugs were introduced, figure out who you need to fire, things like that. And it's also really nice when you're going into a new code base and the client has a source code repository set up already. You can familiarize yourself with the history of that code base and even figure out a little bit about how the development team works too. So, and you get to try out new ideas without fear of breaking anything. And for teams, like I already mentioned, you get to kind of keep up on what other developers are doing. Sometimes we're working in teams. A lot of the times coders, developers become developers because they like to code. They don't necessarily like to talk about what they're coding. But source control is a good way to see what people are doing too. So for the more quiet people that we work with. You can also work on the same files as other developers at the same time. And the thing, when that happens, the person that checks, subsequent people who check that file into source control will see that there's a conflict and they'll be asked to merge their changes together. There's nice tools for doing that too. Also, I mentioned it helps with code reviews, helps with release management because if you plan on deploying something on Tuesday, you can stick to that schedule because you could be working on new features, but your main trunk of your source code is always ready for deployment. It's gone through your testing procedures, and it's clean and ready to go. So I think we'll finish here with the demo. What we'll do is we'll open up PHP Storm. We'll connect to a site. I've created 2 copies of a site, the test environment and a production environment. So we'll pull down a copy from production. We'll create a child theme. We'll deploy that to test, and we'll switch to that child theme. And after that, we can start making a couple of changes and see how to make those changes using our tools and how to kind of create the changes that we want to make to our child theme. So